Good evening and welcome to our special 2-hour coverage of this big election budget. Is it a budget that has something for everybody? The big headlines, of course, what most people are focusing on is the major income tax changes. But is it actually the capex expenditure which is the big story? Vishnu.
Not just capex, this is about India's green economy, the massive outlay over there. Also, has enough been actually done to deal with education, social sector spending? Those are a couple of areas which we'll be looking at closely as well.
And of course, how the opposition has reacted to this budget ahead of the Lok Sabha elections. Is this a budget that could help the Modi government come back to power? What does it mean politically? We'll be looking at the political fallout as well. Sonia.
So let's just look first at the top headlines of what the Prime Minister has said is a Amrit Kal budget. India's big middle-class budget, the focus on growth, major changes in personal income tax slabs, capex expenditure up by 33% to 10 lakh crores, budget 2023 to give the BJP mission 2024. The Prime Minister says this is the first budget of Amrit Kal for New India with a major focus on growth, middle class and the poor. After 4 years, changes announced in personal income tax with new slabs. The big news is that the rebate, the annual income now has gone up to 7 lakhs, up by 2 lakhs from earlier 5 lakhs. You won't have to pay income tax. The other slabs also, if it's the new tax regime, gives major relief. Rahul Gandhi back in Parliament after his yatra says it's a Mitra Kal budget with no vision for jobs or Mehengai. Mamta Banerjee, the West Bengal Chief Minister and AAP, also attacked the budget, saying it's got nothing for the poor and will put India in debt. Markets tank after initial euphoria, concern over a market debenture tax. Also shares in Adani Enterprises tank a day after the FPO was fully subscribed.
And let's get straight to the big takeaways from this big bang budget. Priyanshi has more on the big headlines.
Well, as we've talked about, the capital expenditure that has really gotten the focus in this year's budget and subsidies have been cut. Let's just deep delve into the basic numbers of the budget this time. The capital expenditure outlay has been hiked to 10 lakh crores, which is up by 33% from the previous year. The previous year's budget had it at 7.5 lakh crore. Now it has been hiked to 10 lakh crore. So the big focus in this year's budget clearly is on capital expenditure. That, of course, with an aim to increase jobs as well. Now, it's the highest ever capital outlay of 2.4 lakh crore for the railway sector as well. So railway is also getting a big boost. 35,000 crore rupees have been set aside for energy transition and net zero target of India by the year 2070, as climate change definitely is at the focus of the budget as well. Now, if we talk about the social sector and the welfare scheme, the allocation for Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Generation Program or Manrega Act, that has actually been reduced, and that might be a point of concern. The allocation this year is 60,000 crore for the rural job guarantee plan. In fact, it's the lowest in all of the Modi 2.0 years. So it's the lowest since the year 2018, and it has been cut by 33% compared to the last year. So while states run out of Manrega funds, this allocation being cut might be a point of concern even more. Now, the subsidy budget, the subsidy allocation has also been cut by 28%. The subsidies for food, fuel, fertilizers have all been cut. The fertilizer subsidy has been cut by 22%. The food subsidy has been cut by 32%. Petroleum subsidy has been cut by 34% as well. So that's what the opposition has also been pointing out too, that Manrega allocation has been cut, subsidies have been cut, while capex has been focused on. So the poor might, the allocation for the welfare schemes has been cut in certain respects. Let's also look at the total numbers of the budget. The big highlight for the middle class and for for the taxpayers, for each one of us, is that there will be no tax, no income tax up to 7 lakh rupees of income under the new tax regime. And this has been done to promote the new tax regime and make more and more people to opt for the new tax regime. The income tax rebate has been increased from 5 lakh earlier. So earlier, till the income of 5 lakh, you didn't have to pay any income tax. Now that has been increased to 7 lakh. So till the income of 7 lakh, you don't have to pay any income tax. There have also been new income tax slabs that have been announced. The finance minister said that this will lead to a lot of savings for the common people to choose new tax regime over the old tax regime. But of course, there are differences of deductions as well. Now, the important point, the fiscal deficit target, that has been lowered to 5.9%. The current year's figure was 6.4%. That target had been met, and that has been reduced to 5.9% as the government aims to bring it down to 4.5% in the year 2026. This is the difference between the government's expenditure and revenue, so it reflects the borrowings. Now, let's come to disinvestment. The government has been focusing on a disinvestment push for the last few years, but the disinvestment target has not been met for the current financial year. As you can see, the target was 65,000 crore, but that has been revised to 50,000 crore. And the next year's target is lower than last year's target at 51,000 crore. Now, where is the money really going? The defense sector got the largest allocation at 5.94 lakh crore, which is up from 5.25 lakh crore in the previous year. And the education sector also got the highest ever allocation of 1.12 lakh crore, which is the highest for the education sector. Now, let's come to the announcement for the middle class. As we talked about the income tax rebate that has been increased to 7 lakh rupees. So no tax slabs, no tax for below 7 lakhs of income. Now, there are other announcements as well. The maximum surcharge, which is essentially the tax on your income tax, surcharge is a tax on your income tax, that has been reduced to 25% compared to 37% earlier. Earlier, it was among the highest in the world, so that has now been brought down. That's also good news. The exemption on leave encashment has also been hiked to 25 lakh rupees from 3 lakh rupees earlier, and this has also been increased with an increase in salary. So these are the major highlights of what the common people get out of this budget and how it is a relief when it comes to taxes. Big capital expenditure push, but of course, welfare schemes have taken a hit in some respect.
Well, certainly some of the overall numbers of that budget quite impressive, but in fact there's been a fair amount of criticism as well. The Congress party, one among several opposition parties, pointing out that there's been an element of inequality, there's been an element of not looking out for the poor, and not enough has been done to address concerns over employment.
माननीय वित्त मंत्री श्रीमती निर्मला सीतारमण.
Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presenting her fifth budget, the last full budget of the BJP government before the 2024 general elections. While the ruling party described the budget as a foundation for building a developed India, the opposition called it a budget for elections, lacking any vision.
अमृत काल का ये पहला बजट विकसित भारत के विराट संकल्प को पूरा करने के लिए एक मजबूत नींव का निर्माण करेगा. ये बजट वंचितों को वरीयता देता है. ये बजट आज की एस्पिरेशनल सोसाइटी, गांव, गरीब, किसान, मध्यम वर्ग, सभी के सपनों को पूरा करेगा. मध्यम वर्ग को सशक्त बनाने के लिए हमारी सरकार ने बीते वर्षों में अनेकों निर्णय लिए और ईज ऑफ लिविंग को सुनिश्चित किया है. हमने टैक्स रेट को कम किया है, साथ ही प्रोसेस को सिंप्लीफाई, ट्रांसपेरेंट और फास्ट किया है.
Sir, any expectation from budget, sir?
Rahul Gandhi, back in Parliament after his Bharat Jodo Yatra, tweeted to say the government has no real roadmap for the future. At a press conference earlier, the Congress had hit out at the government, saying the budget showed how far the government was removed from real issues.
That the FM has not mentioned the words unemployment, poverty, inequality, or equity anywhere in her speech. Mercifully, she has mentioned the word poor twice in her speech.
Besides the Congress, other opposition leaders too have criticized the budget.
আজকে যে বাজেট করেছে গরিব লোকদের বিরুদ্ধে বাজেট, অ্যান্টি পিপুল বাজেটকে আমি ধিক্কার জানাই এবং ধিক্কার জানাই ওদের চিন্তাধারায়। এ বাজেটে কোনো আলো নেই, শুধু অন্ধকার।
गरीब भी कह रहे हैं कि हमारे बच्चों के लिए रोज़गार के माध्यम बनाएं। गरीब भी कह रहे हैं कि हमारे हाथ में रोज़गार दीजिए, हम मेहनत करके अपने पैसे कमाएंगे। हमें राशन ये हमेशा के लिए जो कोविड के कार्यकाल में शुरू हुआ ज़िंदगी भर के लिए नहीं चाहिए और अपनी कमियां छुपा रहे हैं। आप रोज़गार के माध्यम नहीं बना पा रहे हैं।
We have seen it in the last 9 years. Wherever they announce an airport, they will only announce it in a poll-bound state. They will either announce it in a BJP government state. Forget about airports, brother. They have announced that they are going to give 10 lakh crore for the infrastructure. Right? Which infrastructure are you talking about? It is all exercise. In the next 1 week, we will clearly know what is given to Telangana. But again, once again, I am requesting through ANI to Nirmala Sitharaman garu, please release our pending dues.
But the BJP called the budget a visionary one. Party President JP Nadda said it would empower the poor and the middle class.
अमृत काल का पहला आम बजट 2023-24 एक लोक कल्याणकारी बजट है। यह गांव, गरीब, किसानों, आदिवासियों, दलितों, पिछड़ों, शोषितों, वंचितों, आर्थिक रूप से पिछड़े तथा मध्यम वर्ग के लोगों को सशक्त और सक्षम बनाने वाला बजट है।
With Arvind Gunashekhar, Bureau Report, NDTV.
Well, we'll have a power-packed panel tonight to discuss every aspect of that budget. Joining me in studio is Dr. Punita Kumar Sinha, who's the founding partner of Pacific Paradigm, also the board member of several companies. But our first newsmaker tonight is Mr. Parmeshwaran Iyer, the CEO of Niti Aayog. That's the government's main think tank, and of course a long career in the civil services, spearheading the Swachh Bharat mission. Mr. Iyer, what's really been interesting in this budget has been the focus on the capex expenditure, the focus on growth, and also a vision for the future. We're talking here about AI, we're talking about accelerating startups and agriculture. Do you think that's part of a larger vision that the government currently has for how they'll see India? We heard Prime Minister Modi today talking about 2047, not 2024.
Sure, Sonia. You know, this is the first time, actually, if you think of it, that a Prime Minister has articulated a vision for a developed country by 2047. And I think this budget is another building block towards that direction. There's no question that it's a budget for growth, but equally it's a budget for inclusion. If you look at the very targeted interventions for the poor, the vulnerable, the backward, the disadvantaged, rural agriculture, in many ways it's a budget for all. But let's talk a little bit about the social sector. One of the most significant features of this budget is the announcement of the PM PVTG, the Pradhan Mantri Particularly Vulnerable Tribal Group. This is a segment in the tribal population which is at the bottom of the ladder. 15,000 crores has been allocated for this mission, and this vulnerable population of about 28 to 30 lakhs scattered across the country will now get saturated with basic services to be provided to them over a period of 3 years. A very, very significant announcement. And given this government's record on implementation on the ground, we are very confident that this will be achieved. And Niti had worked with the Secretary Tribal Affairs and the Ministry to put together this package. We actually made a trip to some of the tribal areas in Orissa to study the situation on the ground. So, but apart from that, you've got the focus on the self-help groups for women, all 80 lakhs of them who will need a little bit more support for marketing and branding to increase incomes and increase livelihoods.
Yes.
Agriculture, horticulture, fisheries, a number of very targeted segments have also been promoted in this budget.
But Mr. Iyer, let me ask you this. You know, the Manrega figures, the overall outlay, it has gone up over the last 4 to 5 years. But what about inflation? I mean, the hike has not been that big that it accounts for inflation as it's gone up. So when we're talking about social inclusion, when we're talking about, feeding people, giving them jobs, has enough been done when it comes to Manrega?
In fact, the allocation's been cut for Manrega.
Actually, if you look at Manrega is an employment guarantee act. So if people need the work, they will be provided work under Manrega. But the livelihoods, again, Manrega, are also being used to create productive assets. So if you look at the Mishti, the proposed coastline mangrove plantation program, that again is going to be funded through, to a large measure through Manrega. So I think on the food security aspect as well, which you touched upon, Vishnu, under the NFSA now, free food grain will be provided to the same target audience. So I think on that front as well, there is no cause for concern. I mean, this government is going to make sure that food security continues to be promoted with the focus it has been getting all along over the past few years.
Mr. Iyer, Nidhi here. I just wanted to, talk about the fact that, at the moment there are these recession fears in other parts of the world, so many global headwinds, but also concerns about a K-shaped recovery in India, with the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer. And we see that reflected in some of the statistics. For example, four-wheeler sales going up, but two-wheeler sales coming down to a decade low. How does the budget address some of those concerns?
Sure, Nidhi. Look, global headwinds, in fact, India has navigated them pretty successfully with 7% growth rate, the fastest growing, largest economy in the world. So, you can have a debate on, and inflation has been contained. Now, you can have a debate on whether it's K-shaped or V-shaped. The fact is that in the social sector, the social safety net is as strong as ever. I think this government, in terms of delivery of basic services over the last 8 years, whether you talk of toilets, which pretty much help women and girls, tap connections, so that women and girls don't have to walk long distance to fetch water. We have 11 crore taps already there under the Jal Jeevan mission. Bank accounts. So I think on all counts, there has been a huge thrust on social sector. So social infrastructure is as strong, if not stronger, than the physical infrastructure in which now 10 crores will be invested in terms of capital expenditure.
Right, Mr. Param Iyer, thank you so much for that. But just to ask questions on that, I'm being joined now by the former Finance Minister, Mr. Chidambaram. Mr. Chidambaram, we had a press conference earlier today, basically saying that tearing apart the many parts of this budget. Now, we all remember that famous dream budget, which at that time you had presented, that was called that. Do you think that it would be right to call this also a dream budget, putting aside your political hat at this moment?
I can't put aside my political hat or my economic hat or my any hat.
You could put aside your political hat,
put your hat when answering a question? Now, this budget, I've criticized it, I've issued a statement. Now, your question is it a dream budget? Now, whether you want to call it a dream budget or not is your prerogative. But I just want to point out that in that long 90-minute speech, the finance minister did not think it necessary to utter even once, the word unemployment, poverty, inequality. She uttered the word poor twice. Now, what is there in this budget for the poor? Tell me. Have indirect taxes been cut? Has GST been cut? Has the prices of petrol, diesel, fertilizer, cement, which poor middle class use, has it been cut? What is there for the poor? And remember, the Azim Premji University's research shows that as many as 5.6 crore people have fallen below the poverty line in the last 3 years, mainly thanks to the pandemic.
Right.
Now, what have you done to lift them above the poverty line?
Well, the economic survey had those figures
according
yesterday.
To the Oxfam report.
Yes.
I beg your pardon?
No, I'm saying the economic survey had the figures yesterday, which showed that they said that a record number of Indians had been lifted out of the poverty line. The chief economic advisor yesterday, Mr. Param Iyer, just outlining measures for the tribal, special tribal fund, measures which he said for women, self-help groups, which he said are all pro-poor.
I heard that. Now, let me invite your attention and to Mr. Parameshwaran Iyer's attention to the record of this government. I'll give you two numbers, 2022-23 budget estimates and the revised estimates. For education, they allotted 1,04,278 crore, but they will spend only 99,881 crore. On health, they allotted 86,606 crore, and they will spend only 76,351 crore, a 10,000 crore less. Social welfare, they allotted 51,780 crore. They will spend only 46,502 crore. I can go down the list. There are 10, 12 items where they have not spent the money allocated at the beginning of the year. Now, why should I believe Mr. Parameshwaran Iyer that the allocation made for next year will be spent?
But Mr. Chidambaram, just on this question of employment, you said the finance minister didn't directly talk about unemployment in the budget. But when the government announces such a huge capital expenditure, increases it by 33%, the idea, I guess, would be that you pump that money into infrastructure, etc., and that in turn is what will generate investment, will generate jobs. Doesn't that give you some hope that at least they're going in the right direction?
That's correct. But look at the execution. In the current year, for capital expenditure, they allocated 7,50,246 crore, but they will end the year only spending 7,28,274 crore. Their execution is poor.
No, but Mr.
So you suddenly bump up this allocation from 7.5 lakh crore to 10 lakh crore. An increase of almost 33%, which I welcome. But do they have the capacity to spend 10 lakh crore?
Sure, but
going by this year's experience, I doubt whether they have the capacity to execute a 10 lakh crore capital expenditure head.
All right, but Mr. Chidambaram, in a sense, Param Iyer responded to a couple of those points or he spoke about those points. He said, number one, over the last 4 to 5 years, if you look at the delivery of social services, they're unprecedented. The number of toilets which have actually been made, 11 crore taps for water, bank accounts which have been opened. And yes, he did point out to capex and the increase over there which would result in more jobs. So he says that it's not correct to say that social infrastructure or infrastructure which would bring people out of poverty was absent. He says, look, we've got a record of it, and he had his statistics. Just as you do.
I'm not disputing that every government will add to the social infrastructure. Who started the toilet program? Our government started. And this government will add to that. And the next government will add to that. Nobody is disputing that. But the truth does not lie in the dry numbers. I took Montek Singh Ahluwalia to Tamil Nadu to show him on the ground what is the execution of the toilet program. I'm willing to take Mr. Parameshwaran Iyer also. Half the toilets are not used. You come with me, I'll take you to parts of Tamil Nadu, parts of any other state. Half the toilets are not used. They are used as storerooms. Why? One, there is no water. Number two, there is no connection to a drainage facility. And many of them have to build septic tanks, which they don't want to do. The septic tanks have to be cleared.
Right.
A toilet is fully functional only if it has water and the waste is connected to a drainage.
No,
you come with me. I'm willing to take you and Mr. Parameshwaran Iyer also.
Well, I think Mr. Parameshwaran Iyer, who, if you all remember
this
famously,
is the fault of
was
this government.
Was the man who actually cleaned
to
toilets when he was heading. He actually went and cleaned toilets as part of the Swachh Bharat mission. So I think it would be very good if Mr. Iyer and you, we'd love to accompany you on that trip. But thank you, Mr. Chidambaram, very much for joining us with your views on Nirmala Sitharaman's 5th budget. But let's just go across now. We've been joined also by Radhika Gupta. She joins me of Edelweiss, MD and CEO of Edelweiss. But let's first go across to what happened today at the markets, because it was a hugely volatile day of trade for the markets. Sakshi, at one time, markets went up by over 1,000 points, then down by over 1,000 points. So lots of factors there today, including market-linked debenture tax as well. And just before we go across to looking specifically at the markets, Dr. Sinha, if you could come in, your take. Now, you've heard the two sides, as they were, of the story, but there's so many other sides to it. So just as an impartial observer here, What are the big positives and negatives of this budget?
So I'll focus on a couple of things that are important to us as investors. One of them is that I think India's debt to GDP is quite low as compared to other markets. The macro stability in India is far better than we've seen anywhere else. Well, we are not growing at 7-8%, but even at 6-point-some%, we are still the fastest growing economy. And then when you contrast that to what's happening in China and all the other large EMs, India looks really good. One of the problems, of course, is that we don't have enough capacity that has been added over the years. And all the foreign companies that I speak to or am associated with, they are all looking to India to add capacity, outsource more jobs, outsource more capacity, get more sourcing from India. But our companies have not invested in that capacity expansion over the last few years. So to this, and now they're beginning to. So we are seeing private sector capex shoot up, but to the extent that the government infrastructure also keeps up pace with it.
Sure.
That's and what we're seeing in the budget is that they are seeking to keep up with that pace. And to add to that is, we don't have enough skilled people. So even if we have all these jobs that are coming to India, or that comes with our growth, and people, both people talked about unemployment, Mr. Sitharaman talked about unemployment. Part of the problem is the wage, the mismatch of skills.
Right.
So let me ask you this, you were talking about the GDP, you alluded to that. Now, debt as a percentage of GDP in 2015 was at 66.6%. That's gone up substantially to just under 88%. And we have high interest rates. So our debt burden, obviously in taking care of that interest, is huge. So isn't that a problem, that debt as a percentage of GDP in India is a problem?
Well, it has come down if you go back longer periods of time and compared to other economies.
It's now at 87.6%.
It was actually at one point.
2015, it was 66.6. It's now gone up.
No, I don't know if you have. It depends on what numbers you're looking at. The numbers I looked at, that it has actually come down over a 10-year period. So I guess it's very sensitive to what time period you look at, but you're also accounting for a COVID period where all governments had to take on debt to stimulate their economies. So if you adjust for that, I think the debt to GDP actually has not gone up.
Okay.
But I think we can go across to Sakshi actually now to look at the markets, and we want to ask you about that, Dr. Sinha, as well. Very volatile day, as Sonia was saying earlier, Sakshi. The market's going up 1,000 points, then dropping 1,000 points. Also, Adani stocks taking a major hit at the markets today again. Was that primarily the reason why the Sensex tanked later?
Well, it was one of the key reasons, but that's right. It was a volatile day of trade for the markets this budget, with both benchmark indices closing mixed. While the Nifty ended the day marginally in the red, the Sensex ended the day marginally in the green. Sectorally also, it was really a mixed picture, with PSU banks and metals really being the worst hit. In stock-specific action, as you mentioned, in stock-specific action, the Adani Enterprises and Adani Port stocks dragged the Nifty lower. Now, remember, it is interesting to know that Adani Enterprises and Adani Ports are not part of the Sensex. Therefore, investors witnessed this rare instance of divergence in the two benchmark indices, the Nifty and the Sensex. And apart from this, of course, market-linked debentures really being taxed at a marginal rate also dampened sentiment, as experts believe wealth managers may now be hit hard.
Sakshi, so now let's just go across. To what Priyanshi is saying on taxes, because we just had a look at that in the headlines. But just to ask Dr. Sinha, what impact do you think? Was this really about this whole focus on the middle class? Both the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister said that. How much difference do you think this will make, given that it means people migrating to a new tax regime? Do you think this will have a big impact?
I'm not a tax expert, but I think, in my view, first of all, from a market perspective, what was really worrying us was the introduction of or changes in the capital gains tax. That hasn't happened. Unfortunately, nobody's talking about that anymore. They're only talking about it going into the budget, but that hasn't happened. So there are, from a market perspective, that's a positive. That has kind of been ignored. And then the slabs have gone up, but have they kept up with inflation? I don't believe they're kept up with inflation, but it's still a good step. So I think whether it's companies or individuals, everybody is opting for different tax regimes based on their own exemptions that they can claim. So even we introduced the new corporate tax regime a couple of years ago. Not every company is shifted to that. So I don't know.
It's not something which would necessarily, be the huge sop which people expected out of this budget. It really depends on case-by-case basis, right?
Correct. I think everybody's individual situation is different, and they will have to analyze it differently and decide.
I just want to go back to the bigger picture that you were talking about earlier in terms of the overall messaging from this budget. And you were talking about, let's say, how we're doing compared to China, etc. The last couple of years have also presented a big opportunity for India in terms of moving manufacturing away from China to India. And we've kind of been stuck, haven't we, when it comes to that make in India, that Atmanirbhar, and moving manufacturing here. What is Vietnam doing right, or Cambodia doing right, that we're not getting?
Well, I think first of all, the skilled labor, lack of skilled labor is an important part of this. And I think that's why this budget has focused on a lot of skilling. And I really like that aspect of it, because that's what, when we look at corporate India, we are finding attrition levels are very high. People are not able to find people for the right job. And on the other hand, we have this huge unemployment and people not able to find jobs. But there's a big skill mismatch. So until we address the education, here in this budget, we've addressed education at multiple levels, including financial literacy, right? So I think that will have a very long-term positive impact on things like adding capacity. The companies can't even often find a basic for infrastructure. I hear you can't even find enough trained electricians, plumbers, and all sorts of different people in financial markets. You can't find back office accountants, etc. easily. So you have to build that backbone, and this budget is addressing that.
Yeah.
So let's just look at let's just take a deep dive into the new tax regime and what it actually means. So Priyanshi, give us an explainer. So for instance, if I earn 9 lakhs a year, how much do I actually save? Because the finance minister actually broke that down during her speech. Go ahead.
Right, Sonia. So people were waiting for a tax relief for the last 4 years. There hasn't been a tax change in private individuals' taxation since the year 2018. So this is the first time in all those years, and people really wanted that because prices had been increasing. So the value of their salary was reducing. So now there's a tax relief that the private individuals have gotten. And let's just give you a comparison of how this will really save you money. Let's look at those figures, those examples that give you the exact sense of this. So there's a new tax regime. The old tax regime remains the same, but the new tax regime has increased the exemption limit from 5 lakh rupees to 7 lakh rupees. So below 7 lakh rupees, you don't have to pay any income tax at all. But above 7 lakh rupees, let's just look at how your taxation has changed. So when if you have an income of 7 lakh rupees, there's no income tax that of course you have to pay. But if you have an income of 10 lakh rupees, you have to pay 54,600 rupees under the new tax regime, and that's actually less by 23,400 rupees compared to what you had to pay in the previous tax regime. So this revision has actually saved you 23,400 rupees. If your income was 50 lakh rupees, that has saved you 54,600 rupees because you'll have to pay 12.32 lakh rupees as your income tax. If your income is 6 crore rupees, which of course is among the high tax bracket for our country, then your tax will be 2.3 crores, or you'll save 20.67 lakh under the new tax regime, under the new proposals that have been made. So this definitely comes as a relief to the normal people. And let's just understand how your income is really taxed. You asked me about that example of 9 lakh rupees income. So for a 9 lakh rupee income, it isn't a straight income tax of, let's say, 5 or 10%, but it gets taxed according to the tax slabs under the new tax regime. So 0 to 3 lakhs will not be taxed at all. Earlier, 0 to 2.5 lakhs was exempted from any tax, but now 0 to 3 lakhs has been exempted from any tax. Now 3 to 6 lakh, that portion of your income will be taxed by 5%. So 3 lakh will be taxed by 5%, which is of course 15,000. Then 6 to 9 lakh, that portion of your income will be taxed by 10% under the new tax regime. So that 10% of course is 30,000. So on your 9 lakh income, your total income tax comes to around 45,000 under the new proposals. But under the previous proposals, that figure would be 60,000 rupees. So you're actually actually saving 15,000 rupees of your income through this new tax regime proposals that have been made by the finance minister. So that is definitely a relief for the common people, but some even saying that the inflation impact is even more than that, but the relief was definitely much awaited and welcomed by the taxpayers.
Right, and of course, there's some fine print also. There's also the good news for senior citizens, but we're going to have a newsmaker on that coming up, Nidhi.
All right, let me go across to the Vice Chairman of the Niti Aayog, the government's think tank. Mr. Suman Berry is joining us now. Thank you very much, Mr. Berry, for joining us. In fact, we were talking about the change in the tax slabs because the salaried class is very excited about that, and that's what affects us the most. Is this primarily aimed at trying to encourage more and more people to go to the new tax regime? Is that what the government is hoping will eventually happen?
Well, firstly, thank you for the amount of airtime you're giving Niti Aayog on this program. That's appreciated. I believe Paramaya was with you a little earlier. Second, let me just say that these are issues that belong much more in the domain of the finance ministry than they do about Niti Aayog. I'm much better value in talking about the global economy. But still, since you've asked, I think that this is a case in point of a well-managed, transition, which is you're giving people the opportunity to stay with an old scheme if that's what suits them. You are creating incentives for them to migrate to a new scheme, which is a more modern scheme, and modern in tax policy is essentially more moderate taxation with fewer exemptions. And it's really a cafeteria approach. People can decide if they want the old exemptions and the old slabs, or so a question of who's getting excited is really a question of who has made that transition and who has not. I really have very little else to add to that.
But you were talking about the world at large, the global economy and its potential impact on India. If you look at nominal growth of GDP, right, in our country, it's expected to be 10.5%. Now that includes inflation. Now, therefore, what would real GDP growth in India be? And I ask this because there are international factors which might influence India. Several countries going into recession. The war in Ukraine isn't ending. So that's something that's not really been looked at. We have an estimate of GDP, but what would real GDP growth be?
No, so Vishnu, the way the game is played, and you're an old hand at this, is that there is a real growth number that comes out of the economic survey, which is a range, and then there's a nominal number that is used in the budget. Okay, I think that to answer your question, it's more interesting to refer to the economic survey yesterday, and I think that the architecture of this budget reflects that. So what did the economic survey say? The economic survey said that expected real growth rate of 6.5% was what the economic advisor estimated, taking into account international factors, including a slowing of exports. And what is the link between that and the architecture of this budget, as I see it, which is that this is a budget which is, in a sense, much more focused on activating domestic activity and not that dependent on the drag that's coming from the global economy. And that drag, as you know, is of two kinds. It can come from trade and it can come from interest rates.
Right.
Let me add a third point that doesn't get enough attention. The reality is that even in a fairly messy global economy in 2022, India has managed to get $100 billion in migrants' remittances.
Right.
Okay, so there are swings and roundabouts in this business, and we are too diverse and linked an economy for it all to be one way.
You know, the other, one of the best things, and I think nobody would have any dispute about this, is 80,000 odd crores having gone towards India's green transition, right? I mean, it's a ballpark figure, whether it's solar farms or wind farms in Ladakh, the integration into the grid, the economic benefits over there, green hydrogen, and a lot of other aspects. How is this the highest sort of investment as far as green transition is concerned, perhaps of any country with the exception of China? But we just don't know what the China rail numbers are.
And your question is?
How significant is this as we look at our economy in, let's say, 2047?
Very significant from 3 points of view, I would say, or at least 2 points of view, Vishnu. First, India is the first country that's trying to grow fast with a completely new fuel mix. This is not to say that we're going to stop using coal, we're going to continue using coal, but we are betting our future on a set of relatively new technologies, and we're the first large country to do that. Second, as this year's budget indicates, this is very capital intensive, and we are doing it for our own sake. It has employment benefits, it has, as it were, lifestyle benefits, including lower pollution.
Right.
But let's be clear, we are also doing this as a contribution to a global goal of carbon mitigation. And so where this leads to, for me, is that we need, as the presidency, as the president of the G20, to create global conditions so that more international finance can come to India to support this. Up till now, this is really being financed domestically. I'm saying, ideally, it should not be.
Right. Well, Mr. Berry, thanks very much for being with us and sharing those thoughts. Well, earlier on today, I'd spoken to the Power Minister, R.K. Singh. We spoke about what the entire green transition was all about and why it's so very significant at this juncture and how it's a key part of this budget. Joining us, the Power Minister with us. Thanks very much, Mr. R.K. Singh, for being with us. My first question to you, if you were to look at the budget and look at, say, 2 or 3 areas where there's been an incredible spend, one of them without doubt would be the transition to a green India, to a green economy. So that huge spend in energy transition, does it make your job and the goals which you've repeatedly announced much easier?
Absolutely, Vishnu, absolutely. In fact, we have already emerged as a leader in energy transition, which you would have seen when you were in Davos. I mean, everybody in the world now recognizes us as one of the leaders in energy transition. Now, this will give a further impetus. Our green hydrogen mission, of course, is already taken off. I already have my industries, having finalized plans for manufacturing 6 million tons of green hydrogen per annum. That's one of the largest manufacturing capacities coming up in the world. And my industries have already tied up export orders from Japan, Germany, etc. Now, insofar as round-the-clock renewable energy is concerned, we are making a foray. Again, as one of the leaders, so you have an outlay for battery storage that will enable round-the-clock renewable energy, which will enable the faster energy transition. We are setting up, Vishnu, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Now we are setting up 10 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity in Ladakh. Now that's one of the highest plateaus in the world, and it also has one of the highest insulations, solar insulation. So the solar efficiency is the maximum there. And we are setting up 10 gigawatts of capacity there, 10,000 megawatts. So for that, we've got this outlay now for setting up the transmission to evacuate that power from Ladakh to the mainland.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because the outlay is whopping. It's huge. 20,700 crore rupees, sir, including central support of 8,300 crores. You mentioned 10 gigawatts. The budget actually said 13, but be that as it may, it's not just about adding to India's power grid, right, through wind and through solar. It's actually about having incredible economic benefits in Ladakh itself, job creation at one level.
Absolutely. You know, Vishnu, what this will do is, I think it will increase the per capita income of the people of Ladakh by, a hefty percentage. Because, it will generate jobs, and it will also generate a lot of revenues for the Ladakh administration, most of which will go to the Ladakh Council as well as the general administration. So it will lead to a fillip, actually a development fillip for Ladakh, apart of course from the benefit the rest of the country will get from the renewable energy with a high insolation. And
National Hydrogen Mission, that's another big spend by the government, 19,700 crores, and the aim is to reach hydrogen production of 5 MMT by 20 million metric tons by 2030. So how important is this project towards our eventual goal of energy independence?
Vishnu, what this will do is, in fact, that, it will not only be 5 million tons by 2030, I see at least this going up to 7, 8, if not 10 million tons for green hydrogen. This will only give a fillip, but after that the industry and the investments will take over. Now what this will do is, number one, we have been greening our electricity. In that we have progressed well. Now 42% of our installed capacity is non-fossil. But you also have to green the other sectors like the industry. Now for example, let's take steel. Now steel, you use coking coal, carbon, right? So there are lots of huge amount of emissions. Now people want green steel. Now you can make green steel by using green hydrogen. Now you use a lot of, you release a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere when you manufacture urea, which is a nitrogen fertilizer. And we use that in huge quantities because you need ammonia. Ammonia is made from natural gas, so you release the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now we are going to replace that with green ammonia, which does not have emissions. It is totally green. So my agriculture will become more green.
Right.
In fact, you take mobility.
Right.
Now, in mobility, what happens is that for four-wheelers, four-wheeler cars and three-wheelers, two-wheelers, battery is okay as a storage. But for long-distance heavy mobility, like long-distance trucks, battery is just not suitable because of the huge size. The battery which will be required and the huge weight. So that will require green hydrogen. So the long distance heavy mobility will require green hydrogen and green ammonia.
What about lithium ion? Because there's a tax cut on batteries. We're talking about batteries. So that's something to encourage electric vehicles at the very least.
Round the clock renewable energy. Yes, Vishnu. Vishnu, in that also we are emerging as a leader. We already have had some bids for storage so that we have round-the-clock renewable energy. Now this provision in the budget for another 4,000 megawatt hours of storage will enable me to have that much more round-the-clock renewable energy. So it will enable industries and companies to transition more and more faster towards net zero. Now, to get to net zero, you need round-the-clock renewable energy. That's what we shall be providing. And again, in this, Vishnu, the great thing is that we are a leader. In round-the-clock renewable energy, again, we are a leader. And we aim to continue that way. So, if you are talking about one sector in which India is at the cutting edge of the world, it's green energy.
So, in fact, that's what I wanted to ask you about. If just by looking at these numbers, you're well over 40,000 crores. No, in fact more, closer to 80,000 crores as far as the government's commitment to this energy transition, this clean transition is concerned. So is this the largest investment by any country of our size in terms of making this transition?
Vishnu, this will be the largest investment. We are already having one of the largest investments in green economy of all the country. I mean, all countries in the world. One of the largest investments in green economy is in us. I mean, no exceptions. I mean, I don't know about China, so you exclude China. But apart from that, we have one of the maximum investments which is coming to any country is coming to India.
So that's just to repeat, the largest amount or financial outlay to green transition anywhere in the world, perhaps other than China, because you don't know about China, right?
I don't know about China. So the investments which I am getting, this of course the outlay in the budget is a spur to the investment, but the total investments which I am getting is, I think, unparalleled. You leave out China. The rate at which I am getting investments in green energy, I think beats every country.
So the Power Minister there speaking to Vishnu a little while earlier, but let's go back to the budget speech and look at some of the key highlights from Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman's budget speech today. It was 90 minutes. Remember last year it crossed nearly 2 hours, but in those 90 minutes she outlined what the aims and goals of this budget were before she went into the specifics like the tax slabs and other things.
The economic agenda for achieving this vision focuses on 3 things. First, facilitating ample opportunities for citizens, especially the youth, to fulfill their aspirations. Second, providing strong impetus to growth and job creation. And third, strengthening macroeconomic stability. To service these focus areas in our journey to India at 100, we believe that the following 4 opportunities can be transformative during Amrit Kal. Priorities of this budget. The budget adopts the following 7 priorities. They complement each other and act as the Saptarishi guiding us through the Amrit Kal. Inclusive development, reaching the last mile, infrastructure and investment, unleashing the potential, green growth, youth power, and financial sector. Personal income tax. I have 5 major announcements to make in this regard. These primarily benefit our hard-working middle class. The first one concerns rebate. Currently, those with income up to 5 lakh do not pay any income tax in both old and new regimes. I propose to increase the rebate limit to 7 lakh in the new tax regime. Thus, persons in the new tax regime with income up to 7 lakhs will not have to pay any tax at all. My third proposal is for the salaried class and the pensioners, including family pensioners, for whom I propose to extend the benefit of standard deduction to the new tax regime. Each salaried person with an income of 15.5 lakh rupees or more will thus stand to benefit by 52,500 I had introduced in the year 2020 the new personal income tax regime with 6 income slabs starting from 2.5 lakh. I propose to change the tax structure in this regime by reducing the number of slabs to 5 and increasing the tax exemption limit to 3 lakhs. The new tax rates are 0 to 3 lakh, nil. 3 to 6 lakhs, 5%. 6 to 9 lakhs, 10%. 9 to 12 lakh, 15%. 12 to 15 lakhs, 20%. And above 15 lakhs, 30%. This will provide major relief to all taxpayers in the new regime.
So those were the big highlights of Budget 2023. But we've got lots more analysis coming ahead. Amitabh Kant joins us, and also Amit Mitra, from now a senior cabinet advisor to West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee. That's after a quick break.